fun information for you kids. So first thing I need to do is find out what grades do I have here. 4th, 5th, and 6th? Okay, perfect. So that's a big range of kids, so I need to think about that as I present. The next thing is I want to welcome you. I want to make sure that all of you have your listening ears turned up high and your thinking cap strapped on, because I'm going to throw a ton of information at you. And it's going to be sometimes maybe even a little tough to keep up unless you're really paying attention. But I want to compliment you because you kids are all having your eyes on me right now, and that tells me that you're showing respect for yourself, for your classmates, and for your guests, and that speaks well of your teachers and your school. So thank you for that. Before I started working at Basin Electric, I myself was a teacher. So I always noticed that in kids and how well they behave and how well they respect themselves. So I appreciate that. So if there's a couple of little things we can do in the beginning that will help things go more smoothly, is that I would ask that you guys would save your questions till the very end. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. That's because if I keep stopping and starting, I won't get done in time, and I understand lunch starts at 11 and I need to get you guys out of here by then. Another thing is, I know I want you to use your good, smart, beautiful brains and connect what I'm saying to your own real life, but sometimes that makes you want to tell me a story, and I won't have time to hear those. So what I would ask is that you would, if there's something that reminds you of a story in your life that you hear today, take it home and share it with the people you live with, and then that way they can learn a little bit about what you learned here today at school. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yes, fabulous. So we'll get started. As Katie told you, this program is called The Story Behind the Switch, and hopefully by the time I'm finished today, you kids will all understand why I call it that. I work for a company called Basin Electric Power Cooperative, and Basin Electric is a wholesale power supplier. What that means is they actually make electricity and send it out to an intermediate power supplier. In your case, that's called Central Power. And then Central Power directs that electricity to a local rural electric cooperative, in this case, Dakota Valley Electric. And then Dakota Valley Electric takes that electricity and directs it out into your homes, schools, and businesses. And so it's quite a process that goes on in order to get you your power, and we'll talk about that in the second half of the presentation. Right now, this is a map of the middle of the United States. This is North and South Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. Everywhere you see shaded in green in that map is the areas where I drive in my trusty white Suburban and talk to kids about this same message. How do we stay safe around electricity? That's my main message for you kids. Where do we get electricity, and how do we use it most efficiently? So those are kind of the topics we'll talk about. So you know that Canada is up here, Mexico is down here. That's a lot of places I go. Now the reason that the company I work for is so eager to have me have this job and go out and do this, and the reason Northern Plains has me come and do this, is because we know we make a really cool product, right? We all love electricity because it makes our lives more fun. It makes us be able to fling Angry Birds and play cool games and have wonderful TV shows we enjoy and computers and lights and heat and all that good stuff. But that faster than that, it can kill you if you don't treat it with respect. So we know it's important that we reach out to our members and our young people and keep them safe. So I will often ask kids, as Katie told you, what makes the lights turn on? And they'll often tell me the light switch, but we know that it's really electricity that lights up our lives. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And there are some very unique things about electricity. Now, when I use the term unique, I mean something that's noteworthy, something that makes you just step back and go, wow, I didn't know that. And believe me, there's a lot of stuff like that about electricity. And one of the most unique, I think, is this. So I'm going to use an example that you might relate to illustrate this point. Most of you have likely been through a drive-through restaurant of some kind at some point, right?
Yeah.
So you know if you go to McDonald's, for example, you drive up because you have an expectation, correct? Because you're hungry and you want food. So you drive up there and you look at the menu, you think of what you want, you drive a little farther and pay for your food, you drive a little farther and pick up your food, and then you go off and you eat it. But what you might not think about is every time you plug something into the wall, every time you flip a light switch, you're placing an order and you have an expectation. You expect that whatever appliance you're plugging in will now start to function, right? Or if it's a cell phone, it'll start to charge, or if it's a toaster, it will light up and produce toast for you. And if you flip a light, you expect that the room you've walked into will illuminate and the lights will come on, correct? So here's the thing though. We cannot make your electricity for you until after you place your order for it. And so if you flip a light switch to place your order, we have to make you your electricity in between the time of when you flip the switch and when your light comes on. We have to make it and get it to you. Now that means electricity has to travel very quickly. Electricity is produced or generated, as we call it, the very same instant it is used. And so it travels at the speed of light. Now that's a huge number, and you all know that's really fast. But that means that electricity can go around the entire world 7 times in 1 second. Now, why that's important to you kids is because there's not one single thing that anyone in this room can do that's that fast. Nothing. We can't even blink that fast. So it's very, very important that we remember that when we're working with electricity. So there's 3 more ideas about electricity that if you can remember, it'll help you make good choices when you're near it, okay? They're not hard, but they're very important. And I'm going to ask you when I'm finished if you can remember them, so really log in here with me. The first one is we say electricity is lazy. Not because it's not dangerous, but because it will always take the easiest possible way to get where it wants to go. Always. Okay? It will take the easiest, shortest path or paths to get where it wants to go. Okay? Number 2 is that electricity always wants to go to the ground. It's the only place it ever cares if it gets to. And the third one is electricity travels on the outside of the wires. So I'm going to show you a sample here of a small piece of a high voltage transmission line. Now this wire is capable of carrying up to 500,000 volts of electricity. Right here is a high voltage transmission tower. Now you kids have probably seen these when you've been driving around with your parents or something. Yeah. What you need to know about these is that these are carrying the power directly from the source that made the power. Whether that's a coal-based power plant, a natural gas power plant, a solar farm, a wind farm, a hydroelectric dam, a nuclear power plant, whatever it is that made the electricity is carrying that electricity initially when it first leaves the power plant on these lines. They're called high voltage transmission lines. This is one example of those. Now, I'm showing you this particular chunk because it's the largest we use and it's the easiest for you to see. When I tell you that the electricity is traveling on the outside of the wires, I don't just mean it travels out here. Can hopefully you tell that this one big chunk of power line is made up of many, many small wires all pushed together to make one large wire? Good. Well, the electricity is actually traveling around the outside of every single one of these wires. All of them, even the ones smushed really tightly in the middle, until eventually it starts to travel around the outside of the whole wire. Okay, can you remember that? Mm-hmm. Now hopefully you can also tell that this one wire is made up of 2 different colors of metal. It's darker in the center. That metal is steel, and that steel is there for strength and durability because we want to try to make sure this line stays up where it belongs. The other metal is aluminum, the lighter colored metal. And that aluminum is there because aluminum is a great conductor of electricity. And what a conductor is, if you're in the business of making electricity, is it's any material that does allow electricity to move along it freely. So does it make sense to you that if we're making some of your power in another state and we have to get it over here to Lidgerwood, we need to have a way to get it from where we made it to where you want to use it in your home, correct? And we do that by giving it a path along these electric power lines made of metal to carry that electricity because metal is a conductor. Now, every metal you can think of is a good conductor. Copper, gold, silver, platinum, aluminum, steel. But would it make sense to make power lines out of gold and silver? Yeah. Absolutely not, no, because that would be way too expensive. And people would probably chop down the poles to try to get the gold and silver. It would be a big disaster. So we use a lot of metals like steel and aluminum and copper when we're making power lines. Now, the opposite of a conductor, when we want to stop electricity, when we want to keep electricity away, when we want to redirect it, we use a material called an insulator. An insulator is a material that does not allow electricity to move through it freely. Good examples of that are wood and rubber and glass and plastic. And we'll talk about those throughout the presentation, okay? Lots of information there. So who can tell me, raise your hand please, and before I even ask the question, I want to compliment you because you kids have eyes on me. You're all directing your body language toward me. You're being terrific listeners. I'm having a great time, and it makes me feel like you're learning a lot about an important subject, so thank you for that. That speaks very well of you. Okay, so number one. Who can remember what this was, number one? Right there in the zigzaggy Under Armour shirt. It's lazy. Can you tell me why we say it's lazy?
Because it's just going to go like directly to the ground.
Good, she kind of combined number two right in there because it wants to go directly to the ground and it'll take the shortest, easiest possible way to get there. You guys are amazing, thank you. Now we can start talking about outdoor safety. So, let's say it's been a long winter here in the North Dakota and you're running along and you're flying your kite and you've got your buddy with you or your dog or something and you're not really paying attention to where your kite's at. And all of a sudden, here's your power line, just out there doing its job, getting you your electricity. Is the electricity inside or outside the wire? Outside. At the speed of light. You're not paying attention and your kite goes and nudges up against that power line faster than you can blink. That electricity is through the kite, through your string, through your body, into the ground, and your brain is going to be telling you, let go! But guess what? When electricity is in your body, you can't let go because your muscles don't respond to you anymore. It responds to the electricity. And instead, your muscles will tighten your grip around that string, and you cannot release it, and the electricity continues to flow through your body until you're severely burned from the inside out or killed. Now, I don't tell you kids that to scare you, I tell you that to inform you. Because I hear scary stories all the time. Do you remember the map I showed you in the beginning of all the places I go and talk to kids? Well, I was in South Dakota last winter. There were two kids, a 7th and an 8th grader. This isn't just for little teeny kids, or 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, or middle schoolers, or high schoolers, or adults. Everyone needs to treat electricity with respect. So these two young men were at one of their homes, and one of them had a trampoline in their backyard. You guys all know what a trampoline is, right?
Yeah.
So I was traveling to this school. I showed up to do the presentation, and the person traveling with me, like Katie is today, and the principal of the school wanted to visit with us before they let us speak to the kids because they had just had a tragic accident involving electricity before we arrived. Now, the kids were in the backyard, and they were bored, so they were going to take the legs off of their trampoline. Okay, so the legs were made out of hollow steel, a conductor of electricity, right? They took all those legs off and they laid them on the ground, and they were going to try to hook them all together and make one big long pole. That's okay. So then, though, they wanted to make sure and see how tall it was. And the one boy wasn't thinking about where his power lines were. And when he lifted that up, it touched the power line and he was killed. And his friend who tried to pull him away and help him was injured severely. So I tell kids these stories as I hear them because I want you to understand it doesn't just happen in some made-up place in this speaker's mind. It happens to our neighbors, to our friends, to our grandparents who are busy on the farm and they don't make the right choices. So I want you kids to understand, and what I'd like to ask you to do, those kids weren't trying to mess around with electricity on purpose. So if they had maybe taken time to pay attention to where their power lines are, they might have thought, okay, wait, before I lift this up, I better check. So when you go home tonight, I would like it if you would look where your power lines are. If you live in town, take a few seconds, go, oh yeah, there's a power line that hooks onto my garage and it goes out to the power pole and then it goes down the alley and around the block. Or if you live out on a farm, think to yourself, oh yeah, I see it, I'm riding the bus or I'm riding in the yard with mom or dad, there's a power line all the way down the county road here and it turns into our yard and it cuts across over there by the pine trees and it goes over to the house. Just be aware and try to remember that, because then if you're outside playing sometime, you might think to yourself, oh yeah, I have to make sure we're not around the power lines, and that will help you, okay? Sometimes those crazy power lines fall down on the ground and I'm a little bit nervous about today, because you know why? Sometimes icy stuff like we might get for weather later this afternoon builds up on those power lines and it causes them to get extra heavy, and then they can sometimes cause our poles to snap and they come down on the ground. We work hard to keep them up there, but sometimes it happens. So let's pretend that a power line is down on the ground and you're walking along, all of a sudden you see it. Stop moving toward it. Turn your body around and go the other way. Then you need to tell someone, a trusted adult, so that they can make a call to the power company and have things done that need to be done to make it safe. Now, when I was outside of Denver, Colorado, a 6th grade kid at this point said, well, that's stupid. How come I can't just take a run at it and jump over it? So you guys have been fantastic listeners, so I'm going to ask you to think back with me to those 3 things. Where did I tell you the electricity always wants to go? To the ground. So if the power line is laying on the ground, that electricity is going to go surging into the ground all the way around that line. So here you come, and here's 6th grader, and before he's even close enough to jump, he's going to be standing on electrified ground. And he's either going to be severely hurt or killed, and even if he isn't immediately, and he thinks, wow, this hurts, I need to get out of here, and he tries to back out of it, it will follow him. Because once you're in contact with electric energy of that magnitude, it's very difficult to pull away from it. And so just like the boy who was the friend of the kid who was holding the line that touched into the power line, that electricity traveled from his friend into him, which is why he had to be in the hospital. That electricity will travel and follow whatever it comes in contact with. So you kids have to stay away from it. Now here's the scary thing. I'm asking you to stay away from something that you can't see. Did you know that? You cannot see electricity. You can't hear it, and you can't smell it. You can only see it or hear it or smell it if it's interacting with another material. So it might be that that power line came down and it landed on some kind of a rock or something, and there's something in that rock that's causing that electricity to interact with it and make a little spark. And when that spark happens, it starts to sound really crackly. And then that crackling makes sort of a hot smell. So if you saw that, you'd probably think, wow, there's electricity in there, I better stay away. But it could fall on the ground and there is no interaction with another substance. It can just fall on the ground and it can have every bit as much electricity in this line as the one where you saw the spark. And it might look no different than this. It might not be making a sound. It might not have a spark. It might not smell hot. It might just be a line on the ground that isn't doing a thing, and it can have every bit as much electricity in there as the one that did. And none of us in this room, even those of us that work for companies that make electricity and provide electricity, have any way of knowing if there's power there or not. So you must assume that there is, and you need to stay away from it. So I have a little demonstration here I'm going to do to try to help you kids better understand that. So if Katie wouldn't mind hitting the lights for me. You kids may have seen these. I'll answer this while Katie's doing that. This is called a plasma ball. This one costs $49 on Amazon.com. Is there any way to get any darker? Yep, there we go. That'll work. Can you guys see this? Yeah. Okay, so if you have seen these are called plasma balls, and that little thing in the center with the pink top is called a Tesla coil. If you ever have to write a paper about someone and you need someone incredibly amazing and interesting to write about, Nikola Tesla is a very interesting person related to the field of electrics. Anyway, you can see the electricity inside of this glass dome because it's interacting with a colored gas inside of there called neon, which is kind of pinkish blue in this case. If that gas weren't in there, you wouldn't see anything when I flip on the switch. Now there's a thing called the electromagnetic field that can't be insulated that we're going to talk about in a minute. But before that, I'm going to ask if you would mind, sweetheart, to come up here for a second. Tell me your name. Taylor. All right, Taylor, I need you to stand like this. Give me a pointer finger. And I'm going to ask Taylor to put her finger on here. Okay, there we go. Now when she does that, you can notice that that electricity wants to get to Taylor, right? Now the reason it wants to get to Taylor is because, remember when I told you that all the metals you can think of are good conductors? Materials that do allow electricity to move through them easily? Well, guess what? So is water. Water is an excellent conductor of electricity. And guess what we have a lot of in our bodies? Water. So our bodies are excellent conductors of electricity. That means that when little Taylor here touches this, that electricity is trying to use her lovely water-filled body to carry it right down to the ground. Now this time I'm going to have Taylor touch it and move her finger all over the place, up and over on the top. Remember when I told you electricity will follow you? It isn't picky. Once it thinks it has a way to the ground, it doesn't want to let go. Now Taylor is not getting hurt from this demonstration because this thing, the round part, is made of glass. Remember I told you wood, rubber, glass, plastic. They're all insulators. They're materials that keep electricity away from us. So Taylor's not getting hurt. obviously. I wouldn't take her up here to do that. However, one more thing to remember is you don't have to just touch electricity with your finger. Remember the kid? Okay? It'll go through your nose. Try your elbow. It'll go through an elbow. So it's funny when we do it just like this in this display. But what you need to remember is you don't have to intentionally touch it. You can brush against it, you can fall into it, and it will go through any part of your body that touches it. So that's the message. Thank you, honey. Now there's one more part of this that I want to show you, where we're going to pretend that this is the power line, and this is the 6th grader who wanted to jump over it. Because there is a thing called the electromagnetic field, which exists in every single thing that has electricity. And what the electromagnetic field says is that there is always going to be a small amount of of electrical energy that can escape, even when it's being insulated. And so I'm going to use this bulb to demonstrate that. Now this light bulb has a big plastic part here and a metal part here. Plastic is an insulator, a material that does not allow electricity to move through it freely. As you know, and we have heard, metals are conductors. So I'm going to be holding the plastic part of this bulb. And I'm going to pretend I'm the 6th grader coming to jump over here, and you cannot see the electricity on the outside that is there to power this bulb. So my message to you kids is, you can't see it, but that does not mean it is not there. And we've got an insulator around that. If there's a power line laying there, there's a lot more energy in it, plus there's no insulator around it. So you have to just believe that it's there, and you have to treat it with respect. Now, one time I was doing this and I accidentally touched the metal part with my finger, and it conducted that electromagnetic energy into my hand, and it hurt all the way to my elbow for a couple of weeks. So you really have to trust me that if the amount of energy in a power line was in that ball, that kid would have been really hurt or killed. So you just have to trust that it's there and leave it alone. Okay, so another point is, there's the power line doing its job, getting everybody their electricity. And let's say every day on the way to school, you're walking along and you always see these birds sitting up on the power line, and you're thinking, must not be any power in the line. And so you think it would be kind of fun to get on this climbing tree and climb up and tap the line and send all those birds flying. And so we're going to pretend this arm is a power line and this is a bird. And tweet, here he goes, and he's going to sit right here. Okay, is the electricity going to get to the ground by going through that bird? No, so it doesn't care about the bird. But let's think about you with your master plan, where you're going to climb this tree over here, reach up and tap the power line. Are you somehow attached to the ground?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And at the speed of light, just like the kite example, it's going to be through your body, through the tree, into that ground, and you aren't even going to have a chance to blink before you are electrified. So you can't do it. Okay? We just don't want to mess with power lines. End of story. This is my last example of outdoor safety. This does not happen often, so I don't want to scare you with that, but it has happened, so it's important that you kids know what to do. If you're the responsible driver, let's say it's a slippery morning like it is today, and they lose control, go off the road and strike a power pole and the lines come down on the car. Okay? That electricity is going to be traveling in a nice big loop around the outside of your car. Okay? As long as you're in that car, you're still being held off of the ground by those 4 tires made of rubber, right? And this is still pure rubber. So it's powerful enough that if you stay in the car and stay away from the outside windows of the car and just sit toward the center, you're going to be pretty much okay, because the electricity doesn't care about you, because you're kind of like the bird on the wire, where you're not touching, it can't get to the ground through you anyway, so you're okay. So the message is stay in your car. Now, if something would happen, let's say that the impact of the accident caused your car to start on fire or something, well then the responsible adult in the vehicle would have to make the choice that you've got to leave the car. The only thing you need to remember is if you have to leave the car, and only if you have to leave the car because there's a worse option, then you would do it in this manner. You open the door, put your feet on the floorboards, knees together, feet together, arms around yourself. You crouch down and you're going to jump so that your whole body is out of the car at once and it's not touching the ground and the electrified car at the same time. So you're going to go like this and you're going to jump. Now I didn't do a big giant Olympic leap because you're jumping from a very difficult position. And you don't want to lose your balance, because if you do, when you fall back against that car while you're standing on the ground, you'll be in trouble. So then you would jump about 20 more jumps away from the car. So obviously, before you do that, you're going to look and try to find the exit from the car that has the fewest power lines around it. And then you're going to jump away from those as you jump out of the vehicle. Now kids will ask me, spend almost all of our question time at the end saying, well, what if? And then ask me a bunch of what ifs about this. I don't want you to do that, because I'm telling you everything I know right now. If there was a baby in the car or a toddler who's too small to do this on their own, you have to press, you or the older students or kids adults in the vehicle have to hold them up against their chest, put your arms around them, squeeze them tight against you, and then jump. That's terribly awkward. You might fall, but you just get back up and you keep trying to jump, okay? All right, these guys are the only ones who have the right personal protective equipment and the right training to know how to work safely with electricity. So I'm going to ask the gentleman in the gray hoodie straight ahead of me. Can you come over here for a sec, please? Okay, and what's your name? Shane? Okay, thank you, Shane. Are you 6th grade?
Yep.
Okay, would you mind taking a little break from 6th grade to be a lineman for a moment? Yay, thank you, sir. Right here you go. I'm going to give Shane a pair of plastic safety glasses. I'm going to let him stand right over here. Now, does it make sense to you all that Shane is going to have plastic safety glasses on his face, not metal, right? Because we don't want something that does carry electricity and direct it toward his face. The next thing Shane's going to need are these, which are called sleeves. They're made of pure industrial grade rubber. And we're going to put those around him going this way. One arm in here, one arm in here. You've already got the pose down, so I need you to just bend your elbows like that. Perfect. Okay? The next thing Shane's going to need are gloves to keep him safe. Now these sleeves, as you can see, are being worn by the gentleman in this bucket truck, and they are there to help keep his arms and upper body protected. Now he's also obviously got to keep his hands protected. This looks like a mitten with a little extra finger. This looks like a normal 5-finger glove, but I want to point out that the guy in the bucket also has leather over the top of the rubber, as does this man. The leather is there to protect the rubber. The rubber is there to protect the lineman. The leather needs to protect the rubber because I'm going to give this one to our lineman for a second, and he's going to go like this and strike a little pose for you. Right here, thank you. These circles are where he has had to send this off once a month at least to be tested in a special lab to make sure that high voltages of electricity have been run through here and that it can't pass through. Well, these things failed that test. And wherever there's a white circle, it means the electricity did pass through. That means it would not have been safe for a lineman to be wearing this. So they mark that and they stamp it rejected, and then these are no longer used by a lineman. So, just because he sent this off, let's say his stuff came back fine. You can go ahead and just kind of relax now. Okay, so let's say he had sent it off and it came back just great. And then he didn't need to climb any poles or do anything with it for about a week. And then all of a sudden he's got to go up and climb a pole. He's not just going to think, oh, well, when my stuff came back last week, it was okay. Every single time he climbs a pole, he has to test these gloves. And they'll do that by putting air in them. They roll them up like a balloon, kind of. And they're going to hold it up along beside his face, and they're going to move it around to the front, and they're listening. And they're trying to hear if he can hear or feel any air coming out of there, because if he can, if air can get out, it means that electricity can get in. And that means this is not safe to wear. He would also have to be wearing a plastic hard hat. Notice, plastic, not iron or metal. He would have to go to college and learn how to become a lineman. He'd have to take regular safety exams and tests to make sure he remembers what he learned. And he would have to have his clothing treated with a special material called an FR treatment that is like an invisible spray they put on there, so if a spark flies on him, his clothes don't catch on fire. So if he has to go through all this to be a lineman, my question to you kids is this: does it make any sense for us to go in our regular clothes and mess around with the power lines?
No.
No, you're smart kids. See, you get it. Thank you very much. You were a lovely lineman. Oops, got to take the safety glasses and here we go. Thank you. Okay? So, the message is, if our linemen go through all that to stay safe, we need to do what we can do to use our smart brains and just stay away from the power lines. So now we're gonna really briefly go through indoor safety. Here's my message. Adults are much worse at this than kids. And the reason is because adults know better, but they get busy, they get distracted, they get sometimes lazy, and then they think, oh, we'll do it this way this time and we'll go back and fix it, and then they don't. So inside of your packets of materials that your teachers are gonna get, there's gonna be a thing for you to take home and talk to the people you live with and love and tell them, if you see something like this in your house, that may not be safe. This gray part is a plug that you can plug into the wall where you can plug more things into it. Or you guys are probably more familiar with the power strips, those long bars. And I've got like a double duty one of those right here. Now you can see that even though I have several things plugged in, I also have several empty ones. That's because every one of these are designed to carry a certain amount of power or electricity. And everything you plug into it is designed to need a certain amount of energy. And if mom and dad get busy and they're not paying attention to what they're plugging in there, they can be asking that to provide more than it's designed to do, and you can create a short or a house fire, and you don't want that to happen. So you want to avoid that. Another thing is we don't want to yank on our cords, because did I tell you electricity travels on plastic or travels on wires? Wires, right? But yet when we look at our cords, they look like they're made out of rubber or plastic. And that's because the wire is inside of there. And that wire is feeding the electricity from here, from the wall outlet, into your thing. And if you keep yanking on it, usually right up here by the plug, it creates a rip or a tear in the rubber. And then next time you go to grab it and plug it in, that electricity that's on the wire in there can shoot right up into your hand and give you a terrible shock. Electricity and water don't mix. I mentioned that. Water is a conductor. So if a material is a conductor, it means it does allow electricity to move through it freely, right?
Yep.
So we can tell that they don't mix. Another story, I was in Iowa. A family bought a farmstead, and they were going to move in, fix up this old house, and live happily ever after. They had 3 little kids. 2 of them, a 4- and 5-year-old, were in a tub playing with bath toys, and another little brother came in and thought mom's hairdryer was a toy. Now, he was young and little, but here's the message for you kids. It wasn't turned on even, but it was plugged into the wall. And he tossed that dryer in that tub, and those 2 kids were killed. So the message to you kids is this. Most modern homes that have current wiring have those little buttons that you can push on there that will say reset, especially in rooms like kitchens and bathrooms that have a lot of water. And they're there because they're designed to stop the flow of electricity to that appliance if something like that would happen. However, even those are not 100% foolproof all the time. So if something falls into the water, it doesn't matter if it's a toaster that falls in the kitchen sink full of water, if it's a drill that's plugged into your grandpa's Quonset that falls into a 5-gallon bucket of water, whatever it is, if it's a cell phone laying on a table charging and it falls in the water, if they're plugged into the wall, do not reach into that water to pull them out. What should happen is the responsible adult in the home should turn off the power to that room or building, go in, unplug it, and pull it out. I promise you, the people that love you will far rather that whatever it was gets ruined or destroyed than you get hurt or killed. So just don't do that. Okay, we know better as 4th, 5th, and 6th graders not to stick our fingers in outlets. But I bet that some of you have little brothers and sisters or nieces or nephews or little relatives or friends who come to your home or you go to theirs, and they don't know better, guys. So it's up to you to be that set of eyes that helps their parents keep track of them. Now, many kids will say to me, and they're kind of excited, and I'm glad of it, well, my mom puts those clear plastic things in there so little kids can't get their fingers in there, and that's fabulous. But that's a good deterrent. That means that it slows them down. It doesn't mean that little busy fingers that are unsupervised can't pull those out of there. So it means you guys, the older kids who know better, have to pay attention and keep them from doing that. And if you see a little kid that's constantly wanting to be messing around with that, move them aside and gently tell them what you've learned. And then tell their parents so that they can make sure they stay away. So you guys have been a great audience so far, as I've mentioned, and you've been sitting for quite a while, so I think you can handle this. Before I go forward, I'm gonna give you an opportunity to stretch, but here's how that needs to look. I want you to, when I say to, stand up, stretch, do what feels good, in place, and then by the time I count to 3, we have to be back down. Can we handle that?
Yeah.
I knew you could. Thank you for that. All up, stretch, do whatever makes you feel good. Okay? Good. I need that blood to go from our bottoms to our brains for our next half of adventure. Okay, go ahead and 1, 2, 3. Where is it? Here.
10:39.
10:39. Yep. Okay. Still not seen it, but thanks. Oh, digital. That's fine. Alrighty. Bulldog new tricks. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left, and I've got about lots more than that to tell you. So I'm going to have to pick up the pace a little bit. We're going to talk briefly for a second here. I want to thank you again for handling that so well. About natural electricity. We've been talking about current electricity, the kind that travels on power lines that companies like ours make. Okay? But there is such a thing as natural electricity, and that's the kind of electricity that just exists out in nature with no help from us at all. It is not man-made. One of those is the kind you see in a thunderstorm. And what do we call that stuff? Lightning. And you know that what I ask you to do is think about lightning like you do the current electricity on the power lines. It is in and between the clouds, and where does it want to be?
The ground.
The ground. And it's lazy, so it's looking for something tall to help carry it to the ground. And so you need to, first of all, if you can, go inside of a house away from walls and windows and get out of electric lighting's path. Now if you're stuck outside because you've been out riding horse in the middle of a pasture or on a hike in a park or whatever, then you need to think, okay, it's up here. It's looking for something tall to strike to help carry it to the ground. So if it's looking for tall, I'm going to get small. And what you're going to do is crouch yourself down. Maybe you guys can see this better if I go over here. You're going to crouch yourselves down, and you're going to just make yourselves into a tight little ball, and you're going to lift your heels, which is the back part of your foot, just this far off the ground, just so you can kind of get your finger under there. And then you're going to tuck your head, and you're just going to sit like that until the storm passes. Now we don't want to go hide under a tree or something, because if an electric lightning bolt hits a tree, it'll go straight into the where? Ground. And then if you're standing on the ground underneath the tree, you're going to be electrified too, so you don't want to do that. So what I just showed you is the best thing to do. Another kind of natural electricity is the kind that's inside of all of our bodies. Every single one of us is born with it. It allows our hearts to pump blood, our lungs to breathe oxygen, our thumbs to fling angry birds, everything we like to do. The last kind of natural electricity I'm going to mention, I bet every one of you in here has experienced as well, and that's when you're shuffling along in your socks some evening and you go over and touch a metal doorknob, or you touch a refrigerator door, or if you're being naughty, you touch your dad or your sister or somebody, and they get a shock. And what do we call that?
Spark. Static electricity.
It's a spark, and we call it static electricity, yes. So what I'm wondering is if would you mind being a volunteer for me for a minute? Okay, perfect. Now, what's this young lady's name? Madison? Okay, Madison, I hope you're not bashful, sweetie, because what I need you to do is shake your hair like a rock star for us. Do you think you can do that? Okay, you don't? Okay, then I need to get another volunteer. Okay, how about you in the orange? Come on right over here. Okay, great. And what is her name? Drea. Okay, I need you to come here, and what I need you to do is go left to right as fast as you can. Yay, good work. Keep on going, keep on going. All right, perfect. There we go. And then you have to leave it. I'll move it a little bit so it's not in your eyes, but I don't want you to tuck it behind your ears. Okay, perfect. Now, you guys have a job too. You need to be scientific observers. And what that means is you're going to observe the specimen during the demonstration, in this case, lovely Drea, and we're going to look for changes. Okay, so here we go, Drea. I'm going to ask her to come over here and stand on this plastic stool. Is plastic an insulator or a conductor? Insulator. She's going to take her left hand, tuck up your sleeve like this, put your hand right up there like that. There you go, perfect. And just keep it smushed down like that, and then let this arm hang comfortably. And then the only thing you have to remember, Drea, is don't take your hand off there until I tell you to, okay? Now, I'm going to flip this on, and we're going to let Drea just kind of get percolated for a second. And I bet some of you might start to notice some changes. Now, Drea is raising up her eyebrows because I think she can feel something going on, probably. Okay, now, Drea, I'd like you to give me another pear shape, leave your hand on there. Okay, good. Now, as she's standing there, we're gonna just get someone else rounded up over here. Let me have you on your backboard above the basket. That tire would be as tall as the top of that box, okay? Now here, if you like math, I'm gonna give you a number. Each one of those trucks that hauls the coal has 8 tires. Each one of those tires costs $76,000. $76,000 for one tire. Each one has 8 tires, and there are 5 trucks that are working nonstop to haul your power, or to haul your coal to the plant. So now we've got the coal out of the ground. This is the world's largest front-end loader that we use to load the coal into the trucks. Those can fill a 250-ton truck in 3 scoops. That's how huge it is. This is the last step of the mining process and my personal favorite. When in your state, North Dakota, we have 5 years from the time we take that first giant scoop of dirt out of the ground until we have to put it back the way it was before we started. So this is an image of a little slough that was taken not far from the farm I live on. And the coal has been excavated from this land, and then we put it back the way it was. In order to do that, we have to have scientists who come and study the trees, grasses, rock formations, water quality. They record all of that information in great detail. All those giant buckets of dirt we dig out have to be saved and stockpiled, and we have to use that dirt when we put the land back the way it was. If this was a crop land instead of a slough, where a farmer had been planting a crop, we have to plant the same crop rotation on that land. We have to keep that land for 10 years until we can show that we can produce a crop that's as good as or better than the farmer was producing before we can turn it back for public sale. That's the end of the mining process. Now we've got just a few minutes to make it into coal, or make it into electricity, right? Now the kind of coal your state has a lot of is called lignite. This is a chunk of it, but lignite's not considered to be the world's greatest coal because it has a lot of water in it, because it's the youngest of all the coals. So that makes it a little heavy and expensive to export, but it also makes it a little bit challenging to burn. But in addition to the 2 coal-based power plants in North Dakota that are owned by Basin Electric, we have 4 other coal-based power plants in North Dakota. Those 6 coal-based power plants could continue to make electricity at our current rates of production using our lignite coal for the next 800 years before we would run out. So we use it as an affordable, reliable resource. So to get around the problem of it being difficult to burn, the first stop at the power plant is a place called the pulverizer. What happens at the pulverizer is that coal is smashed and crashed and bashed up in this big giant machine until it's in smaller pieces, much smaller than this even usually, like a powder. That powder is blown into a boiler. Have you all seen a picture of our state capitol building?
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to use your imaginations for me here for a minute and imagine a boiler. And a boiler is just a big steel cylinder with a bottom and a top on it. So I want you to imagine a steel cylinder. You all know what a cylinder shape is, right?
Yeah.
It is as round as half of your gym, and it's as tall as our state capitol building. That is the size of the boiler in the Antelope Valley Power Plant.
I don't believe it.
Inside of that steel cylinder, there are steel pipes filled with water. Okay? We take that pulverized coal, we blow it into that boiler, we start it on fire, and it bursts into a huge ball of flames where it burns at 3,000 degrees hot. What happens when we add heat to water that's in those pipes?
Gas.
It boils and makes steam. That's the whole reason we build these. That steam is 1,000 degrees hot. It's under terrific pressure. We take that hot steam, we push it out of the boiler into a place called, we take it and put it into a place called the generator. The generator, this is a picture of a generator. If it was the real thing, it would be about as long as the room we're in, and about as tall as from the floor to the ceiling, and about half as wide as this room. That hot steam goes pushing into this generator, and it forces these 3 fans to spin really, really quickly. When those fans turn, this shaft that it's hooked to starts to turn with those fans. When that shaft starts to spin, it forces this giant magnet to turn. When the giant magnet starts spinning inside of these copper wires, copper's a conductor, right? When you spin a magnet inside of a conductor, you create an imbalance of electrons that produces electric current. Yes, exactly. That electric current is carried on aluminum bars inside of big steel pipes to a place just behind the power plant called the switchyard. The switchyard has two jobs. It has to amp up the strength of that electricity until it's at 345,000 volts usually, where it travels on our standard 345,000 volt high voltage transmission line, which is what is usually on here, although it's occasionally this one. And it also has to tell the electricity where to go through a series of switches that are computers use to flip on and off. Now, once it travels sometimes hundreds of miles on these power lines, remember, it goes all the way to New Mexico. Then it goes through other substations like you see around your communities as it gets closer to your community, and it changes the electricity to 7,200 volts, where it travels on lines like these on the wooden poles around your communities. Now, you may have noticed there's these things that look a little bit like a trash can that hang on those wooden poles. Those are called transformers, or if you live in town, in your yard, you might have a gray or greenish box with a lock on it. Those are transformers. Their job is to change this electricity from this one more time to 110 or 220 volts, where it travels on lines like this into your homes or schools or buildings. Here's the thing, guys. That whole process, from the time we blow that powdered coal into the boiler and all the way through this generator and all the way through that, happens every time you flip a light switch and every time you plug something in. And that's why we call it the story behind the switch. So hopefully you can see that electricity is valuable, and it's important that we use it wisely. And one way we can do that is by the type of light bulbs we choose to use. And by the time you kids graduate, we may not even be making these two anymore. This is called an incandescent light bulb. This is called a compact fluorescent light bulb, like I was using earlier in my presentation. And these are called the bulb of the future. They're called light-emitting diodes, or LED bulbs. Scientists are working to constantly make things more efficient and that last longer and use less energy, so that not only do we have to worry about making energy in cleaner and better ways and using science and our good brains to do that, but also ways of using energy in better and more efficient ways. And so I hope that if anything you take away from this presentation today, you will learn that electricity is your friend. It makes our lives so much better, but yet it can kill you in a blink if you don't use it with respect. So I want to thank you kids for having me come talk to you today, and if you have a few 1 minute's worth of time, I can answer.
They don't eat yet, it's just kindergarten.
Okay. All right, so I will answer maybe 4 or 5 questions if teachers have time for that. Right here, young man.
Like when you test a pile of coal, if you have rubber shoes on, would that protect you?
That's a good question, because I forgot to mention that. He's asking me if you touched a power line and you were wearing your tennis shoes, wouldn't that help? Like, let's think about the 6th grader who wanted to do that. Here's the thing with rubber tennis shoes, guys. They're not made out of rubber anymore. Most of them have colors in there that are mixed with other dyes and synthetic materials, and they're not going to protect you because it's not pure rubber. Even if you had on a specific kind of a work boot or something, the size of a human foot is not big enough to protect against the size and amount of electricity in a power line. So you wouldn't be able to have enough of it in the bottom of a shoe, even if it was a shoe that had pure rubber. So that doesn't work. By the way, thinking back to that same 6th grader who wanted to jump over the power line, when I showed the part about the lineman, he said, well, so does that mean if I took my mom's rubber gloves that she cleans the house with, that I could wear those and touch the power line? I have serious worries for this kid. Anyway, no, it most certainly does not. That is not made out of pure rubber. It is not strong enough. It will not protect you. The message I have for you guys is stay away from the power lines. Right here real quick. Wouldn't electricity pull you to the spot where the electricity is what? You mean like yeah, if you come in contact with the wire, it won't necessarily pull you, but what it does, it might look like it's pulling you, but it's really the electricity jumping at you from where you are, from where it is. Yeah. Okay, not lineman guy, because you got to come up and do that, and if I have time, I'll ask you that, but the guy beside you in the twin shirt.
You said that if you touch the power line and you were standing in a tree, it would go down into your body and then turn into the ground. You said wood doesn't conduct electricity.
Right, I did, but I hope you know that there's a lot more in a tree than wood, right? It has a lot of water in there too, right, that makes the pulp, and that water is going to conduct that right straight to the ground. Good question. Okay, right over here in the nice light little top. Would it get hurt? Okay, she has a question about an animal on a power line. And that's a good question. She said, what if there's a tree by a power line and a raccoon, or let's say a squirrel or some other animal, goes up the tree and gets on the power line? Watch this. If it jumps from the tree directly onto the power line, it's going to probably be just fine. However, if it jumps onto the power line and part of it is touching the pole that's touching the ground, or more than one of the lines at the same time so it can complete a circuit, then it's not going to be okay. So it depends. You'll sometimes see cats or squirrels that end up in trouble because they'll climb a power line and then they'll step out onto the line while some part of them is touching another part of the line, and then they get injured. Okay, last question right here. You can ask me again. Right here. Hey, what if you jump off a tree and land on a power line? Does that sound like a good plan? No, but let me ask you this. If you did that, is your body going to hang towards the ground once you grab it, or is it going to be doing a handstand? No, you're going to be hanging towards the ground, and that power is going to follow you as close as it can towards that ground, and you're going to still be there. Okay, guys, you have been an incredibly patient audience. If you have more questions, please ask them to your teachers. They will be getting packets of information from Katie that they can take to the classroom. And I want to thank you again, and I want to remind you, if you forget everything else, please stay safe. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
You know mathematical